words in that video for the New York Times, I want to break them down. You talk about how there's no coincidence when you compare the plantation and the prison. This was the plan since abolition. I think we can reach general agreement among people of all different political persuasions today that the criminal justice system needs to be reformed. But what's the basis for saying that today it's all part of a plan to keep people subjugated?
Just going far back as parole and probation, like a lot of people who go back in and out of prison are being stalked by a parole system or a probation system where not even committing crime puts you back in prison. And I learned from personal experience. I actually spent time with men that had 28 months in prison for a $100 bail. They wasn't even found guilty for their crimes, and $100 kept them in prison. And we had the taxpayers, even myself, had to pay money to keep guys like this in prison, and it was for like a petty crime. So, and things like that never made sense to me. Even being on probation, I've been on probation since I was 19 years old. I'm 31 years old. Growing up in the system, I always thought this was normal, and I didn't value myself the way that I value myself now. And as I look back at it, just seeing people work in prison for 8 cents an hour, not really be able to pay their dues and pay their debts back to society. They was paying their debts back to the system, and money was being made.
I know, but in the video you say this is part of the plan, that it's all about subjugation of African Americans, and I'm not understanding where's the evidence for that. That we have an unfair system? I get it. Yeah, but that it's all part of a grand design, I'm not seeing.
Yeah, my vision of it is I see that some of these statutes and laws are basically targeted towards a certain group of people where we are like trapped inside of a system that's extremely hard up for us to get out and control. I don't know who made it. I don't know who responsible it became. Many years before me, I was born into the system, into this lifestyle, and I don't feel like anybody is addressing it to try to help fix things. There's a lot of things in the system that clearly don't make sense to the world, but it's going on today, and it's keeping many young black men caught up in the system without even committing crime.
Are you able to square that with the fact that the judge with whom you've had so many run-ins recently is herself African American?
Yeah, I ain't even blaming on like Caucasian African American. I think it's actually a mindset of actually self-hate. I don't think it's really a thing of a certain color, but it's designed to keep people like myself and the culture I come from. You could be white and come from where I come from and born in these conditions and still get caught up in the same design.
Do you see President Trump as an ally in the cause for criminal justice reform?
I'm not a politician, but I feel like anything that a president does to fix laws and statutes that don't make any sense and are unfair to American people is the right thing to do for anybody to do.
You know that, I mean, this has been a rare issue where he has sought to do something bipartisan in nature. Surely you're familiar with his efforts in this regard.
Yeah, I'm not too familiar with everything Donald Trump do because I don't really keep up with politics. I see when they say he passed bills. What was the last bill he passed? You know, I don't know exactly the last bill he passed, but I think it was involving the crack and cocaine bill where, you know, you get probably 5 times more jail time for having crack than you having cocaine, and crack is of course an urban community drug of choice, and cocaine is more like a suburban, or I would say I call it 2 Americas, where you have one America where it's almost like the white America and a black America, and crack cocaine is a black America choice of drug, and cocaine is a white America choice of drug.
I ask about politics, and I ask about President Trump in particular because, as you well know, Jay-Z goes after Kanye on your new album over the whole Make America Great Again business.
Yeah, and I don't think he really goes after Kanye. I think he actually just says, like, don't let them separate us like they did Michael Jackson and Prince, basically. Kanye came out of nowhere and just went red hat, and that was like kind of against everything we represent. I don't know what he represents, but coming up in the hip-hop community, we came up fighting for our rights for a long time, and what that red hat represent don't really represent what we've been fighting for our whole lives.
Did you talk to Jay-Z about those words? You know that today this is a big trending subject, so I have to ask you, did you talk to Jay-Z about what he was thinking, why he wanted that to be on your new album?
No, I didn't talk to him about it. I just was like, yo, I had dreams my whole life of having a Jay-Z verse, being able to rap with Jay-Z, who I view as the greatest of all time. So, you know, whatever he did, I just was going to accept it, and that's what he gave me. That's what he delivered to me, and I was happy with that.
You were just happy to have him on the album, regardless of what it is he wanted to rap about.
Yeah, that was one of my idols I looked up coming to in the rap business my whole life before I even was in the business. So that's what it was more about.
How about the mindset? I have to play devil's advocate and ask Meek Mill this. You wrote that piece for the New York Times, and not only did I read what you wrote and watch the video, but I also read the comments that were appended to it.
Yeah.
Many of them were supportive, but many of them, Meek said, hey, you're not the right guy to take on this fight. I can put one on the screen of just something that was typical. I'm not defending our criminal justice system at all, but let's look at the facts. It was more than just a wheelie. We don't know his juvenile record. He got probation, on and on and on, got convicted for selling drugs, possessing a firearm. Essentially, it makes the argument you didn't play by the rules. And if you had played by the rules, I'm going to give you the chance, but if you hadn't played by the rules, you wouldn't have had issues with the system.
I always dreamed too of being like on like CNN and being able to express myself and speak for like the voiceless young men of America. The first step I would say, I grew up in America in a ruthless neighborhood where we're not protected by police. We grew up with people selling drugs on our neighborhood, on our front steps. We grew up in ruthless environments. We grew up around murder. You see murder 7 days a week. I think if you grew up in my neighborhood, you see 7 people die a week, I think you would probably carry a gun yourself. Would you?
Yeah, I probably would.
Yeah,
yes.
If you seen your neighbors and family members, or you seen one of your best friends you grew up with get your brains blown out, I think you would want to protect yourself. Second of all, my first juvenile arrest, going to school, being suspended, I didn't want to tell my mother that I was suspended from school because my mom would have to take off from work. She was a single parent, and my father was in the graveyard. So, you know, I was afraid to tell my mom I was suspended. I went to school on a suspended day. That was my first arrest as a juvenile for being in school. I guess the charge was trespassing. And at 18 years old, I was arrested by the narcotic strike force, which most of these guys were federally investigated. Most of these guys were found out to be liars. They lied on the stand and was proven to be liars. I was arrested for pointing a gun at a whole strike force. You know what a strike force? A strike is when 5 or 6 cops come to do a bust. I was arrested for pointing a gun at 2 or 3 cops without any shots being fired. And this is for America. Now we have like cameras and hand cameras. I want to ask you, do you really believe I pointed a gun at 2 or 3 cops without a single shot being fired? A young black man and...
I don't know what the underlying facts are. I just don't want to ignore the argument that some make that, hey, Meek Mill's not the guy who should be making this case.
I just want to explain it. I just want to know from a personal opinion, do you believe a young black man in America can point a gun at 2 or 3 cops? Because I'm not the only one that get found guilty for these things. Cops charge people with these things at an alarming rate, and people take deals because they don't have lawyer money or they can't afford attorneys to even fight for their freedom. Do you believe that a young black man can lift up a firearm and point a gun at 2, 3 cops while they're attempting to do a bust with their firearms out and not a single shot being fired? That don't even make sense in America. And I never really spoke on that because I never valued myself growing up in a ruthless environment. I seen that happen to many kids, so it was just normal to me. And as I grew up, I always felt embarrassed being around like my Caucasian friends. And I used to always say, like, do you believe I pointed a gun at a cop? Where I come from, like, I'm on a successful path. I got sense. Pointing a gun at a police officer is suicide for a black young man. I never thought about committing suicide in my life, so that's almost like disrespect to me. And I was accused by another black cop, which things I speak on my album Championship, where I talk about self-hate. So I don't know how people could say that I don't think I should be the face of it. I was wrongly accused. I was sent to jail multiple times for not even committing crime. I've been sent to jail at least 2 or 3 times just for being addicted to Percocets and never sent to rehab. I was sent to jail for popping a woolly. If you follow me on Instagram, which many of these kids in America do, I've been popping woolies on my Instagram across America for the last 10 years, and I never was arrested. The farthest it ever went was a traffic ticket. And my whole message to get across is, if somebody like myself who's doing so good for myself, I'm not involved in crime, I've been working, I employ people, I pay taxes. If probation can stalk me down and bring me back to a state penitentiary without committing crime, what could it do to these other kids that are trapped in these environments surrounded by crime and violence? They don't stand a chance. You have thousands of kids that will be destined to be put in prison for the rest of their life. Their beds are already made up.